is really being designed to suppress democracy in our country.
I call Holly Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. In what will be my final substantive contribution to the committee stages debate on this electoral amendment bill, I'd like to propose an alternative title for the bill, and that is the electoral fraud is a red herring amendment bill, because that indeed is the excuse or the reason that has been given for the removal of the clauses related to the Easy Vote card, which we have largely been debating for most of this afternoon. And I want to quote from the Select Committee report who gave their rationale for the removal of those clauses, and this is what they said. We consider that the proposed provision for a new process known operationally as Easy Vote Express, i.e. the scannable Easy Vote cards, would in effect lower the threshold for casting a vote, increasing the potential for fraud and harming the integrity of the voting process. And I just want to drill down into that a little bit more to see if we can, as a House, begin to understand what that increased risk of electoral fraud supposedly is, because it's my contention, Mr Chair, that that is in fact a red herring, and that's why I'm proposing an alternative title for this bill. So let's have a look at what voter fraud might actually mean in practice, because we've been very short on practical examples in this debate. Now, from my understanding of the possibilities for voter fraud and the concerns that may have underpinned the removal of these clauses, the concern is that somebody may find or steal the Easy Vote card belonging to another person and take it along and impersonate them at the polling booth. And that may increase the risk of electoral fraud. Well, first of all, I would say that is entirely equally as possible under the status quo, where we have Easy Vote cards that aren't electronically scannable, as it is if we make them electronically scannable. The risk of that happening neither increases nor decreases as a result of removing the clauses from this bill. But secondly, I'd say that's pretty unlikely, Mr Chair, to happen. Most people don't leave their mail lying about in the street. They don't leave Easy Vote cards, on their front lawn or on the berm in front of their house for people to collect. But if somebody was so exercised and so desirous of committing electoral fraud that they were going to go and steal somebody's Easy Vote card out of their letterbox, knowing that what they needed to do was look for an Electoral Commission branded envelope with the orange guy on the front of it in the letterbox and steal it so that they could commit electoral fraud, then they could do that, and they could steal the enrolment confirmation letter that the Electoral Commission sends to every voter, because it looks the same. It's in the same kind of envelope, and it would provide exactly the same information that somebody who was hell-bent on committing electoral fraud by stealing an individual's Easy Vote card out of their letterbox would need to go down to the polling booth and commit that fraud. So the Easy Vote card neither increases nor decreases the risk of somebody doing this incredibly bizarre and incredibly unlikely action of stealing an Easy Vote card out of somebody's letterbox. But let's say they did do that, Mr Chair, and they got hold of somebody else's Easy Vote card and they took it along to their polling booth to try to commit fraud by voting in somebody else's name. Now, if the person in whose name they were attempting to vote had already voted that day, then they would be unable to do that, because the Electoral Commission, at least under what's proposed, would have scanned the Easy Vote card and it would show up that that voter had already voted. So a question mark would immediately be raised through the electronic system that here's somebody who's coming to vote for a second time. Actually, under the status quo, where the card is not scannable, that wouldn't show up in the system until much later. So the people at the polling booth would have to allow that person to vote, because they wouldn't know that they'd already voted at a different polling booth. So the proposal to make the card scannable, which has now been deleted from the bill, would actually decrease the chance of that happening. But let's say they manage to cast a vote in somebody else's name and the true voter has voted already at a different polling booth. Then when the Electoral Commission staff come to collate the rolls at the end of the day, they see that the same person has apparently voted twice. And that flags for them there is a problem here. Either somebody has erroneously voted twice or there is an instance of potential fraud. And they ring the voter up and they say, which polling booth did you vote at? And they say, I voted at Petone Central School. And they say, well, that's funny because somebody tried to vote in your name at Wilford School. And they say, well, that wasn't me. I definitely voted at Petone Central School. And therefore, the Electoral Commission is able to determine and cross out the vote that was erroneously cast. Now, that is how it works at the moment, Mr Chair. Mr Chair?
Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And making the Easy Vote card scannable, as the proposal was in the original version of this bill, would in fact make it faster and easier for that to occur by making that an electronic process, not a manual compilation later in the day. So it actually decreases the risk of electoral fraud. And so, Mr Chair, it's nonsensical to me, and that's why I'm proposing the title that electoral fraud is a red herring in this bill, that would be the risk on which the decision to delete these clauses would be based. Now, the other way that somebody could commit electoral fraud doesn't even involve the Easy Vote card at all, because you don't need the Easy Vote card to vote at present. You can just go to the polling booth and give your name and address, and they look you up on the roll. All the Easy Vote card does is make it faster and easier for the staff in the polling place to do that. But if I was hell-bent on committing electoral fraud, like all these thousands of legions of fraudulent voters are apparently desirous of doing, then all I would need to do was go and give my name and address, give an erroneous name and address of somebody I knew who lived in the electorate and try to vote for them. I could do that without an Easy Vote card. Perhaps, in fact, more easily, because all I would have to do, I wouldn't even have to erroneously pass something over. I could just say, yep, my name's Joe Bloggs, I live at this address. And if that was the name of a voter on the electoral roll, I could vote in that person's name. Now, that is no different, Mr Chair, than under the removal of these clauses than it would be otherwise. The risk neither increases nor decreases with the use of an Easy Vote card, and yet again we have that excuse of potential increased fraud held up as an example. In fact, the Electoral Commission gave very clear evidence on this when the Select Committee first did its inquiry into the election, the 2011 general election. They know when this happens. They get a flag because they see that the same voter has apparently voted twice. They ring that voter up to find out where they voted, so they discard the irrelevant vote, and they prosecute any cases of electoral fraud. And that they are very clear, they have very clear processes to do that, and they work very well. So there is no need for this exaggerated fear about voter fraud that has resulted in the removal of a number of very useful clauses that would allow the Easy Vote card to be scanned and used as a record that a vote has been cast. Now, if we take a cynical view, which I'm increasingly inclined to do, like my colleagues in the Labour Party, you could argue that electoral fraud actually is a red herring here. It's not about electoral fraud. We've had very clear evidence there's no increased risk of electoral fraud. Electoral fraud is not an activity that is undertaken on a widespread basis in New Zealand. When it is, it's easily caught. The very few cases that we have had have been prosecuted, and in fact, this is about trying to reduce the use of a card that maximises people's participation in our democracy. The Easy Vote card streamlines the process of voting for many people, particularly for those for whom English is a second language, for those who have impairments, for those who may be new migrants. It makes the process less intimidating and much easier. And for the staff in the polling booth, it makes the process faster and smoother and allows them to get through the very busy and important work of election day in a more efficient manner. And we are throwing all of those things out, Mr Chair, because of some beaten-up fear of increased voter fraud, which is not borne out by any evidence of reality, and which is that, in fact, the risk of which is neither increased nor decreased by the use of the Easy Vote card. So I think it's a real shame, and I'm increasingly inclined to take the view, as my colleague Mr Lees Galloway has, that there is some ulterior motive at work here, because if the government was listening to reason and listening to common sense, they would have allowed the bill as they drafted it originally and brought to the floor of this House to be amended to revert back to the way it was when it was first drafted, to ensure that the Easy Vote card provisions which would enable the Electoral Commission to make the card scannable and use it as an electronic record of a vote cast were included, because it's a sensible, smart modernisation of our electoral law, and that's what should have happened. And there would have been consensus across this House, albeit that the Select Committee didn't recommend it. Upon closer consideration in the Committee of the Whole, which is the proper place for that to happen, Mr Chair, there would have been consensus across the House to make those changes, or to leave the bill as it was originally drafted, to allow the Electoral Commission to make those changes, and it's a real shame that that's not happened. So, Mr Chair, my proposed title for the bill as it now stands is that the electoral fraud is a red herring amendment bill. And I invite listeners and those members of the public to consider the government's motives carefully.
I move that the question be now put.
The question is that the question be now put. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote has been called for. I ask the clerk to conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 opposed.
Māori Party.
3 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The question will be put. The question is a clause 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's been called for. I ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 opposed.
Māori Party.
3 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Brendan Horan.
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. Clause 1 will stand part. The question now is that Clause 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's been called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 opposed.
Māori Party.
3 in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
Oh, he's in the House now. He's in the House and he has to vote, doesn't he? I'll just explain. The member who is just arriving, because he is now in the House, he is required to vote. And I'll just ask the clerk, we are voting on Clause 2 of the Electoral Amendment Bill, and the clerk is going to call for your vote.
Brendan Horan.
1 vote in favour.
Members, the ayes are 65, the noes are 56. Clause 2 will stand part. I will report this bill without amendment presently. Members, we now move to the Families Commission Amendment Bill, and the question is that Part 1 stand part.